Now you might remember that a couple of months ago I was living with the Skoda Enyaq. It was a fully electric car that meant that I had to dive into EV ownership with both feet. Well, the Skoda's gone back and it's been replaced by this. It's a BMW 3 Series Touring, but it's not just any 3 Series Touring, it's a 330e. And that means it's got a plug-in hybrid powertrain that combines petrol and electric power. Now, most people see plug-in hybrids as a great stepping stone from conventional internal combustion engine vehicles into EVs, but you could argue that I'm doing something of a backward step by going from an EV into a plug-in hybrid. But I think it's going to showcase just what these cars have to offer, as well as any limitations they might bring because of the combination of that petrol and electric. So it's going to be an interesting time spent with this car, and I think it's going to throw up some really cool questions that we can find out together. In this video, we're going to see what the 330e is like to live with, some of its faults, some of its general characteristics, and some of the things I think you might enjoy. So let's find out what life is like with the BMW 330e. I've always been a big fan of BMW estate cars, and I'd say that this latest generation of 3 Series Touring is one of the sharpest to date. I really like the headlights, and I like the way that they light up and close down when it's dark. And you also get some clever aerodynamic features in the grille. As you can see, it's closed off now, but they can change depending on the airflow. While around the back, you do get a twin pipe setup, which I think is a little bit overkill for a plug-in hybrid, but it certainly gives it a sportier feel.
Something else that I find really handy with the 3 Series is that it's got this app, so I can check out to see various functions about the car. I can even unlock it, I can flash the lights, and most importantly in the summer when it is occasionally warm, I can actually pre-cool the car and start the air conditioning. The whole app works really well too, and it gives you loads of features, and that's one of the best parts of having the plug-in hybrid, is that you can pre-cool it, pre-ready it for when you want to leave, and you can see how much fuel and electricity range you've got combined, which, as you can see, isn't very much at the moment.
This BMW 330e, as it stands, comes in at 55,955, which is quite a lot of money, but then it does come with just over £9,000 worth of optional extras, and those include the M Sport Pro Pack, which brings adaptive suspension and 19-inch wheels, and the adaptive LED headlights, and even the M Sport brakes with those red brake calipers, which I think you could probably do without. There are quite a lot of features on this car that you could delete, but I think as a total, it has lots of options that many people would enjoy, particularly ones such as the wireless charging, and for me, the Harman Kardon sound system, which is really good, and particularly good for when you're listening to those movie soundtracks on those long drives.
I remember when BMW announced that they were going to be doing a new version of their touchscreen system, but without iDrive, without the rotary controller, and a lot of people were a little bit miffed that that was going to be removed. Now, this 3 Series has got the new curved display, which is full touchscreen, but it also has the rotary controller as well, and it's part of the kind of crossover area. In cars like the 2 Series Active Tourer, you've not got the controller whatsoever, but interestingly, during my time with this car, I found myself not really using the rotary dial at all. The touchscreen itself, and I'll spin this around so you can take a look. The touchscreen itself is really useful, and it's really responsive, and it's got loads of features too. So actually, for most of the time, I don't really bother with the rotary dial whatsoever. So I think that's quite an interesting change. Sometimes it's quite handy to have the shortcut button just for the media and navigation, but for a lot of it, I just don't bother with the rotary dial whatsoever. And CarPlay works really well in this car too. It's wireless, so as soon as you get in the car, CarPlay is going.
Charging is a big point for any plug-in hybrid, and as you might see, the charging point for this car is located on the left flank behind the charging port, and I actually think it's quite handily located. And as you'll see, charging is something that I try and keep on top of with this car because it's at its best when it has a full battery.
I've actually seen, during my time with this 3 Series, I've noticed that a lot of the 3 Series that are on the road are 330es, and I think that's probably because of the tax breaks that you get with having a hybrid. The port for the charging is down here, and actually the fact that it's located there is really handy for getting nice and close to the charging ports. Now, unlike a usual EV, and and not like the Enyaq that I had previously, I can charge this up via a 3-pin plug at home. And actually, if I put it on in the mid-morning, by the late afternoon, it's pretty much filled up, and I've got around 37 miles of range to use up then. And actually, when I do charge it up, and I try and do that as much as I can, because these cars are at their most efficient when they're fully charged up, get about 37 miles, and that's really more than enough for just pottering about. Like today, I can drive to town, I can drive to the tip, which is something I'm doing quite a lot, and I can do that all on electric power alone, and I think that's really useful. And it has meant that I've not actually had to fill this up an awful lot, but it does bring me on to another point, which I'll explain in a minute.
Something that the 330e does fall back on is boot space. It loses 90 litres over the regular 3 Series Touring because of the fitment of the batteries and the motors. So that's something that I have found during my time with the car, is that it's just a little bit down on space from what you might think a conventional estate car would have. Inside, we've got BMW's latest curved display, which is a really great feature. Now, something that really kicked people off when BMW released its latest series of infotainment was the fact that iDrive was going to be taken away. Now, the 3 Series combines iDrive with the new display, but in fact, during my time in the car, I've actually been using the rotary control in the middle less and less, and just been using the touchscreen. So I actually think all the fuss in the first place was a little bit out of place.
So the point I was going to make about the fuel in the 330e is that it only has a 40-litre fuel tank, and that means I've not been getting the kind of range that you'd expect from a 3 Series. I've actually nearly run out of fuel a couple of times because I've been so kind of on autopilot, thinking that I'm in a 3 Series, it's going to have loads of range. You kind of get used to being in a 320d, that the 330e just doesn't deliver as much mileage. So I've actually had more range anxiety in this than I have in the Enyaq that I had previously, which seems really strange. I've certainly done a couple of longer runs. I've been up to Cheshire and back, and I've been up to the Midlands and back, and it really can't do any of those trips on one tank. I need to fill up, and although the fill-ups are relatively inexpensive because you just simply haven't got as much fuel going in, it does mean that you just spend a bit more time filling up than you expect to in a 3 Series.
Rear seat space obviously isn't something that I'm tending to try out during my time in the car. I tend to be driving it, but we do put the dog back there from time to time, and she seems to find it just fine, although I have tried it out back there and legroom is a little bit tight, but thankfully because of the panoramic sunroof it does let in plenty of light, which makes the whole area feel a little bit brighter and a little bit bigger in general.
One thing I do really enjoy about the 3 Series is just how good it looks. I mean, I've always been a big fan of a 3 Series, and I think this latest generation one looks really good. I think in estate layout it's just still one of the best around, and I know most people drive SUVs and want SUVs at the moment, but I do just think an estate car has so many positives in that it's lower to the ground, the dynamics are better, and it's just sleeker going through the air. So you just feel the whole car's hunkered down. It just feels a little bit more natural to drive, I think, at least. And you've still got loads of boot room.
The driving experience of the whole with the 330e is something of a mixed bag, because I really enjoy the powertrain, but as I mentioned, it really does need to be kept charged up. Otherwise, you are left with that 2-litre petrol engine, which delivers around 45 mpg that I've found with my time in the car, and that could be easily bettered by something like a 320d, particularly if you're doing longer journeys all of the time. However, it gets a really nice steering feel, really sharp dynamics, and because of the adaptive dampers on this one, you can soften it off, and that makes the whole car far more comfortable, particularly when you're dealing with rough roads. I just think it's worth bearing in mind which powertrain you want from your next BMW 3 Series Touring, because this plug-in hybrid, although it brings the chance of lower fuel bills, lower tax bills, and the chance to run on electric power for up to 40 miles, does come at the detriment of outright practicality, and that's something that predictably you'd be after from your next estate car. Fortunately, there are plenty of used options on the market at the moment and currently on Motors.co.uk, which you can check out, which have conventional petrol and diesel engines if you want that tip-top practicality. But this plug-in hybrid, with its lower running costs and its decent performance, is still a very admirable choice. Thank you for watching this Motors.co.uk review on the BMW 3 Series Touring. Now, if you have enjoyed this video, please leave us a like below and let us know in the comment section what you think of this car. And you could, while you're here, click that subscribe button, click the bell icon, and then you're notified every time we upload a new review.